A beef between two titans of the New York music scene hits the sex trafficking and racketeering trial of Sean Diddy Combs. Why 50 Cent was brought up this week during emotional witness testimony. Combs and 50, they've been at odds for a long time. And now, one of them's facing the possibility of spending the rest of their life in federal prison, and the other is not holding back or hiding the apparent joy they find in that possibility happening with a guilty verdict. We're on the case presented by Law & Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. Sean Diddy Combs and 50 Cent. These two go back a long time. They have been rivals for a long time. And this week we learned that, at least from Diddy's side of things, this feud apparently went far beyond words. 50 Cent's name came up during the testimony this week of Capricorn Clark. She is a former assistant of Sean Combs who went on to become the head of marketing for his Sean John clothing brand. Clark rose successfully and professionally through the ranks of Diddy's world during her time working for him, which stretched between 2004 to 2018, so she saw a lot. Clark claimed that Diddy would threaten her, and she says he even kidnapped her in 2011. All of this matters as we build up to how 50 Cent kind of factors into what she said on the stand. Now, Capricorn Clark started working for Bad Boy after she worked for Death Row Records. Now that's surprising, since Death Row was ran by perhaps Diddy's most hated enemy, Suge Knight. Clark said that one of her good friends had a baby with Suge Knight, and that's how she knew him. And in perhaps the most shocking story from her testimony, Clark claimed that shortly after she started working for Diddy, Diddy and his security guards took her to Central Park after dark, and Diddy said, quote, "He told me he didn't know that I had anything to do with Suge Knight, and if anything happened, he would have to kill me." It is an allegation that paints Combs as someone who is ready to take a life. But as Capricorn Clark's testimony continued, she brought up another rival of Sean Diddy Combs and another allegation that he made an ominous threat of violence. Clark testified, when working for Diddy, they went to a press event at MTV and 50 Cent was there. And just wait until you hear what she says Diddy told 50's manager. 50 Cent's real name is Curtis Jackson. He rose to fame in the early 2000s. You might remember songs like In the Club. You might remember that he was the leader of the rap group G-Unit. Now, 50 grew up in Jamaica, Queens, New York. Diddy, also a New York native. He was born in Harlem, grew up in Mount Vernon, New York, just about 20 miles away. And even though they both had success in music, they both rose to fame representing the city of New York and the rap scene there, they have been longtime rivals. In 2006, 50 Cent released a diss track about Diddy. So almost 20 years ago, this goes back a long way. And in that diss track, he says, quote, "Who shot Biggie Smalls? We don't get 'em. They gon' kill us all. Man, Puffy know who hit that expletive. Man, that expletive soft." Now 50 is accusing Combs there of knowing who killed his friend, the notorious B.I.G. Christopher Wallace. Wallace and Puffy were incredibly close, but Wallace was shot and killed in a drive-by shooting in Los Angeles in 1997, and no one has ever been charged for pulling the trigger. This all happened during really the height of the East Coast, West Coast rap rivalry of the 90s, which involved Suge Knight, who we mentioned earlier. 50 Cent has also accused Diddy of orchestrating the murder of death row rapper Tupac Shakur, who died in 1996 in a Las Vegas drive-by shooting. This is Dwayne Keefe D. Davis. He was arrested in September 2023, and he is the only person facing charges related to Tupac's murder. But 50 Cent has continued to push the allegation that Sean Combs either knows something or did something for Tupac to end up dead, though Diddy has denied that. But in a 2023 Instagram post, 50 wrote, "Damn, so Pac got lined by brother love, LOL, time to lawyer up, expletive might get sticky," with a pic of Suge Knight in a car with Tupac. Diddy, who has a lot of names, Puff Daddy, Puffy, Puff, and Brother Love is one of those other names. Now from Diddy's side of things, again, he's denied having anything to do with Tupac's murder, and he's also denied having anything to do with Christopher Wallace's death, and he's denied publicly having issues with 50 Cent. Here's what Combs said when he was asked about a beef with 50 in a 2018 interview with the radio show The Breakfast Club, Power 105.1 FM.
Hey, yo, I don't have no beef with
I don't know why.
With Fifth. He loves me. He loves me.
Do y'all really have a beef?
I mean, y'all can't see it.
No, we can't
Y'all
see
can't
it,
see
man.
that he loves me.
But see,
You really, hold on, you really think that's hate?
If you look at 50's social media, you can see he has a lot of posts about Diddy. And this is what he posted the day that federal agents in Miami raided Combs' mansion ahead of his arrest on the charges that he's now on trial for. 50 Cent posted on X, now it's not Diddy do it, it's Diddy done. They don't come like that unless they got a case. 50 Cent also included a link to his G-Unit clothing brand in that post. While Diddy in the Breakfast Club clip said that 50 Cent actually loves him and there was never a beef, on the stand this week, Capricorn Clark said otherwise. Clark said that she was at this press event at MTV with Diddy and 50 Cent was also there, all of this happening in New York. Clark said, quote, after the interview wrapped up, myself, Puff, and Chris Lighty got in the elevator. Clark said that Lighty was an entertainment manager who, on paper, was managing Diddy at the time, but was also 50 Cent's manager at the time. Prosecutors asked Clark what happened in the elevator, and she said, quote, Puff told Chris, because they were having some sort of issue, like, I really don't like all the back and forth. I don't do that. I like guns. The prosecutor then asked, what's the issue with an individual? And Clark responded, he had an issue with 50 Cent. She said Combs was very serious when he said that. In this case, it has become common to hear testimony from witnesses about alleged threats by Diddy. In fact, several witnesses have said that Diddy regularly threatened to fire people, to beat people, like his former girlfriend Cassie Ventura, and in this case, making a threat involving firearms to settle a dispute per the testimony of someone who was one of his closest associates for more than a decade. Invoking gun violence and some sort of veiled threat, that could be scary for some, but apparently not 50 Cent. On Instagram, 50 posted right after his name came up in the courtroom, quote, cut, wait a minute. Puffy's got a gun? I can't believe this. I don't feel safe, with a picture that looked like an AI image of 50 Cent on a movie set looking serious. And he wasn't done. Shortly after that, he posted another AI image on Instagram of him in a Yankees hat with a very scared look on his face with the caption, oh my goodness, itty bitty Diddy wants me dead. I have to lay low, sad face emoji. I think I'm gonna hide out at the playoff game tonight, LOL. Then the next day he posted what he did that night. He went to the NBA playoff game between the New York Knicks and the Indiana Pacers in Indiana. And you can see him here in a picture on the floor in a shirt that reads, quote, Free Diddy, playing into the trolling that 50 Cent has done to Sean Combs over the years, even before Combs was ever accused of what he is on trial for. Now, Combs' trial is expected to last another month at least. He's charged with racketeering, sex trafficking by force, and transportation to engage in prostitution. He has pleaded not guilty. Join us now to talk more about the trial of Sean Diddy Combs and everything that's going on inside the courtroom is Afi Patterson, civil and criminal defense attorney. Thanks for taking the time to be with us. We're focusing on what was a minor moment in the grand scheme of everything we heard in the trial this week, but there's this anecdote that Capricorn Clark told about what related to 50 Cent, but what Diddy allegedly told 50 Cent's manager at MTV during her time of working for Diddy. What did you make of that? Sean Combs saying, I don't like the back and forth, but I like guns.
I think it goes to the overall case. They've been saying that Diddy was a dangerous guy. If he made a threat, he could back it up. And I do recall reading that she said that his demeanor was very, very serious. And knowing the history, knowing his history, his violent history, knowing about the beef between Biggie and Tupac, I think that it probably frightened her. And I think that just again, her knowing about his violence, his propensity for violence, his behavior with her, his behavior with Cassie, his behavior with other employees, he's just continually in reinforcing that violence. So I think it was a really good moment for the government.
Yeah, it's just, and it seems like there are these little moments along the way where there are some celebrity names that pop up. This case, it was 50
Mhm.
Cent. We heard earlier in the trial, Usher and Neo were at a dinner where Cassie was allegedly assaulted. It was unclear whether they saw that, but it
Mhm.
was said that they were there. As far as the history of 50 Cent and Diddy, do we know how it started? I know that 50 Cent had a diss track, I think around 2006, claiming that
Mhm.
Sean Combs knew who killed Biggie Smalls. But is there a particular incident that happened that made 50 Cent just seem to really start to come at Sean Combs?
I don't know what's ground zero for them. I've seen, interviews that 50 has given saying that it's all business with them. I know they both have alcohol lines, and I know, they're both from New York. I think 50 is maybe from Queens and Diddy is from Harlem. I don't know what their ground zero is, but I know that since this since this all came out, 50 has not stopped. He's been taunting Diddy online. You, of course, know about the documentary. I believe it got picked up by Netflix, and he is supposedly donating the proceeds to victims of domestic violence. Diddy has had his knee on his neck and his foot to the gas on Diddy for a while, but again, I don't know where it started.
Yeah, I mean, 50 Cent, for many people, if it was ever, there was an anecdote that came out that someone had said, "Oh, I like guns," when talking about it back and forth, it might scare you. 50 Cent was at the
Mhm.
Knicks Pacers game in Indiana with a free Diddy T-shirt on, sitting courtside the next day. That's
Was
just
he?
it's different. It was, yeah, it was different.
Mhm.
I look back and we aired a bit kind of leading into this interview, a clip from the Breakfast Club. It was 2018 and Diddy was on the show and they asked about the issues that he had with 50 Cent. And he said, "There's no issues. I love him. He loves
Mhm.
me." He was kind of joking about it. And then you hear these stories that come out, whether it's this one specifically
Mhm.
about 50 Cent or just in general, the picture that's being painted by the government in this trial. For you, has kind of the image of Sean Combs and who you thought he was, has it changed during the course of what we've seen over the last couple of weeks?
Certainly over the course of what we've seen, but I think I've seen an interview where 50 said, if you want to go nowhere, go to Diddy. If you're ready for your career to die, go to Diddy. It's long been rumored that Diddy didn't necessarily treat his artists properly, and if you look through his roster of artists, you'll see a lot of individuals whose careers probably started off really, really well, but they ended up with no money. That's long been the rumor. There've been rumors of abuse by Diddy toward Cassie and toward Kim and some other women as well. Even when he was at, I think Uptown is where he originally started. So there've always been rumors, but nothing really solidified and verified like we've had in this trial. It's been awful. I think it would be awful for anyone. I don't think his reputation is in the business world certainly will never recover. And even if he's found not guilty, his name is mud. I don't think that it's recoverable. I think everybody is extremely shocked, especially just some of the sexually explicit things. We have a huge morality issue in America. So anything that's like a little deviant is just not going to be really good for you. So I think everybody's a little shocked. I'm a little shocked and appalled and horrified, and I think a lot of people are. But this is not what we knew. We knew some things weren't right, but we didn't know just how wrong they were.
And I feel like we just knew because I mean, we all grew up, whether it was, some of the roles he had in movies, and I mean, he was everywhere, and then his brands were everywhere. And it's like Making the Band was such like a hit show on MTV back in the
Hmm.
day. And there's that famous scene where he has all the contestants walk to Brooklyn to go get, I think it was Junior's cheesecake, and he's yelling at
Hmm.
people. And then it seemed like everyone around him in any documentary that he did, it was like, oh, that's just Puff because he's always just so angry. And then it's just this whole other level in the trial where it just, as an attorney, I mean, how effective has the government been as you just read? And we can only read transcripts really and kind of hear from the people we
Hmm.
have in the courtroom, but just at this point, how effective has the government been in painting the picture of this isn't just someone who was a domestic abuser, this isn't someone who was just a mean boss, but this was a racketeer who was running a criminal enterprise?
Yeah, and I think the forced labor issue. I think they've done an excellent job with that. With the transcripts I've been reading, a lot of the people are saying that they worked for 20 hours, like that's the magic number, 20 hours straight. They, on a good day, we heard you'll get 4 hours of sleep. On a bad day, you'll get 4 hours of sleep. I think one of the what is it, a bodyguard said, if you sleep you're getting fired, like, it was more rhythmical or rhythmic than that, I don't know, but you couldn't sleep around him, and I think that's what we saw with making the band. But again, we really didn't believe it. We thought it was for entertainment purposes. We didn't think someone could really act like this. And if an employee gave any pushback, uh, you know, they would either be terminated or they'd be threatened with reputational damage. They would be threatened with being blackballed, or they actually would be blackballed. And I think the government is doing an excellent job of proving forced labor.
And on that forced labor part, because on one hand, and I found it interesting, like George Kaplan, who is a former personal assistant for Diddy, like detailed all these, witnessing the abuse, he said, of Cassie. And then he was someone who would start work at 9:30 in the morning. And I think he said sometimes he went home at 7 o'clock in the morning the next day. And that's just what it was like. And he still, at the end of his testimony, said something along the lines of, he respects Diddy as this business person. In the eyes of the law and in this trial, what's the line between, well, this was a guy who just worked his employees really hard, to the point of where it was a forced labor issue where he was breaking the law?
So I think the perfect forced labor issue is, I think, Mia's testimony, that we read through today. And I think it's really easy for someone to say, well, hey, why don't you just leave? Well, one of the elements with forced labor is, if you leave, you're threatened with reputational damage, you're threatened with being blackballed, you're threatened with psychological manipulation. So I think, that's a perfect example. With respect to Kaplan's testimony, I think the what was so important is when he said toward the end of his testimony, I believe, that did he call him a god amongst men? Well, how did he become a god amongst men? Did he use his enterprise? Did he use his influence? Did he use coercion? Did he use threats? Did he use violence to become a god amongst men? So I think, whereas a lot of people may think that that was really flattering toward Diddy, I thought that that was more damaging than anything, because of what he did to become a god amongst men. Does that make sense
And
to
and I
you?
No, it does. And that's an interesting way to look at it,
Yeah.
because at the end of Kaplan's testimony, we did a show specifically, and I found it interesting because, like, really, in the grand scheme of all the witnesses, George Kaplan's probably, by the end of this, someone that we may not even remember his name. But
Mhm.
I just found it interesting where he was worked so hard. He was cleaning up the hotel rooms, and talked about all the baby oil and stuff that he was cleaning up in the hotel room. So you're just like, what kind of job is this? And then at the end, he's still like, yeah, it was almost, he was trying to be complimentary. But you look
Mhm.
at that and you're like, the view that people had of Sean Combs within Bad Boy and Combs Enterprises, it was beyond, it felt like a boss, because there's still this, like, I need to give him a compliment at the end of the
Mhm.
testimony. From the defense's side, they have tried to say, well, hey, Sean Combs, the video from 2016, yeah, it's bad. He was, this is domestic abuse. It's not a domestic abuse case. This is a
Mhm.
racketeering, sex trafficking case. As a criminal defense attorney to this point, how have they been doing in trying to score points for Sean Combs after some really difficult testimony that the government's putting forward?
I think they've been making some good objections. I think that they've been doing the best they can. I was shocked that they didn't cross-examine Cassie's mother, which I thought was extremely damaging testimony. But I think they're doing exactly, the best that they can with what they've got. I think that Diddy ran a campaign, or at least this is what the government is showing us, that he ran a campaign of psychological warfare. You can tell in the type of people that he hired. A lot of people have testified that if they left, they didn't have really many resources. They may not have had the parents or the spouse or the background to help them do other things within the industry. So, and I think he did that on purpose with his hiring practices. And again, it was just a reign of terror and psychological warfare. I think the defense, they're just doing the best they can. They're poking little holes in people's memories, which to me, it really doesn't matter. The fundamentals are what matters. If you can't remember whether somebody had on a yellow shirt or purple shoes, like, that doesn't matter. I care about the fundamentals, and I think they're doing great jobs with poking holes, but they're not doing a good job where it matters because they don't have anything with respect to where it matters, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And one thing you talk about the objections, and I'm happy you brought that up because just reading through the
Mhm.
transcripts, it seems like there's an objection. I remember in Deontay Nash's testimony, the celebrity stylist, it was like every single question, the defense was
Mhm.
popping in and having something to say. Is that typical? Is this an above average amount of objections that you're seeing from the defense?
No, I think it's pretty normal. I think they've been strategic about it. I think they've been quiet when they need to be, and I think that they've been pretty vocal, where they need to be. So I don't think it's out of the ordinary.
Typically when you object, and I'm always just fascinated by that because I think there's a big difference probably between what you see on
Mhm.
Law and Order and the reason for objections in real life. When what is the way a question, this is kind of just getting into the legal part of it. What is the way a question needs to be asked and why would you object in certain cases where it seems like the prosecution's asking an open-ended question and then the defense steps in and objects?
Well, so a lot of the objections come from laying the foundation. So an example of laying foundation is if we know that a drug is at issue. You don't want to say, when you saw such and such with the drug, what did you do with it? You want to first lay a foundation. Where did this item come from? Did you know what was in the item? And if they say, yes, I knew there were pills in it, I got them from such and such place. Okay, how did you know what these pills were made of, or what impact they'd have on the body? I know what ecstasy looks like. Oh, this was my prescription that I past to X, Y, and Z. You just have to lay a foundation. And sometimes if you're not laying a foundation, you're going to get an objection.
And then just finally, as we're still on the front end of this trial, and it's incredible to think that the prosecution still has a couple more weeks to go with everything we've heard
Mhm.
thus far. When it comes to the racketeering, they've made the argument that he was responsible for the arson of Kid Cudi's car. We've heard
Mhm.
multiple people like Capricorn Clark say that she was kidnapped by Sean Combs. Has the government to this point, how close are they, in your opinion, to kind of reaching the bar that they need to on these charges?
I really think they've reached it. I think they've reached it with sex trafficking. I think they've reached it with forced labor. I think, who knows with respect to the arson, but I think they've reached it already. And I think it's going to be important in their closing for them to, those little games we used to play when we were kids, draw the line, connect the dots. They're just going to have to connect the dots and be very succinct about it in their closing. And I think that's why they're shutting down early, and they're going to cut a few witnesses from what I've heard, because you don't need them. You don't want to overwhelm your jury. And I think it's just, bring it home in the closing. That's what they have to do. I don't think that um, really not much the defense can do. I think that, they're going to talk about how he's just a bad guy. He does bad things, but this doesn't rise to RICO. And I just don't see how they're going to win with that.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. It's been
Mhm.
a very, very interesting. Interesting is an interesting word to use for it because there's just been so much each and
Yeah.
every day. Very difficult testimony in many cases from people like Cassie and like Mia and so many of the other people we've heard from. We'll see what happens next. Afi Patterson, civil and criminal defense attorney. Thank you for joining us on Law and Crime. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I appreciate it.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.